Welcome to our podcast, Sprinkle with Hope. This is your host, Jason, and we have an awesome guest with us today, Meghan Smith Brooks. Thank you so much for joining our show, Meghan. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you and I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, of course. Would you mind just kind of introducing yourself a little bit to our audience so they can kind of get to know who Meghan is and kind of what you do and your background a little bit?
No problem. I'm an ordained unity minister and I've been a spiritual educator for 25 years. But since my experience of grief and loss, I have now become a certified grief coach. And in the last year, published my book, Unraveling Grief, A Mother's Spiritual Journey of Healing and Discovery, in order to support anyone that is impacted by grief, to give them hope, to give them tools and practices, and to make a difference in their life. And so that's really why I'm here to help talk about that today.
This morning, I was listening to you on a YouTube video, and you shared when you found out about a very tragic incident that happened in your life. And I couldn't even think to, how would I react in that? Would you mind sharing that with our listeners I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. But if you wouldn't mind sharing that, I know it is difficult for some to talk about, but I think you're open enough to talk about it.
No, I think it's important to bring difficult topics out into the open and to give people hope that you can get through it. We all experience pain and loss. It's part of our human experience. We can't avoid it. But when something really heart-wrenching happens, it can devastate us. So 7.5 years ago, my 29-year-old son was murdered. And I found out about it when I was just arriving at baggage claim in Fort Lauderdale to attend a minister's conference. And I had some colleagues with me, and my older son, I had just turned on my cell phone and he called me and he said, "Mom, are you sitting down?" And when somebody says that, it's
Yeah.
probably not good news. And I just like, what's going on? He said, "Mom, they found Justin's body in the river. He's gone." It's like this tsunami of emotion that just slams you. It's like I felt like I was knocked out of my body because you go into denial. It's like, what? I didn't hear that. That can
Right.
be true. I mean, I tried to call him before I left. I couldn't reach him, but I just talked to him, in the last week. That had to have been a mistake.
Yeah.
And so it's a slow process of coming to terms with accepting something that horrible. And at that time, I didn't even know he'd been murdered. So it was a gradual process of new information that I had to absorb. And every time it was um, heart wrenching. And, I remember people saying, "How did you even get out of bed in the morning?"
Yeah.
And there were days that I didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. I just can't imagine that you're about to embark on a cruise and enjoy that time, and then you find out this tragic news. So I'm curious, how or when did you decide to open up about this and share this with the world and change that grieving moment into something that you're hoping to help other people?
Well, it was a process, but I realized at the time I had this sense of gratitude for a number of things, which was surprising in the midst of that pain. And one is that I was already a minister leading a spiritual community. So I had a foundation, some practices and tools that a lot of people might not have when something like that happens. And so I had been supporting others in difficult situations in life, but it's very different when you have to practice it on yourself.
Yeah.
So I had to step back and realize, okay, now it's time for me to use that. And how do I move forward? And as I observed myself and other people's reaction, I noticed that a lot of people are not comfortable with someone else's grief. They want to change the
Mm.
topic, they want to avoid it. They don't know what to say. I found myself saying things like, "I understand, I don't know what to say either." And so moving through that, I realized that what I've learned could be helpful to others. And so eventually I felt like I needed to write a book. It took me until the beginning of 2020 to really feel like if I don't do this, I'm not I'm not listening to myself. I'm not practicing what I'm here to do. And it's something I just had to do. It had to come out of me. And I shifted my whole ministry focus from what I was doing to focusing in on supporting people with grief. And I think it's needed in the world.
I 100% agree. I think if any time in our world's history we need it more, right? Like we need it right now, for sure. We're grieving all different kinds of things at the moment, and so different things that are happening in our world and chaos and craziness. So,
Yeah.
how do we kind of calm ourselves down enough to, like you brought up gratitude, and I love gratitude because it seems like when I get gratitude into my heart and into my soul, like my day just gets better because I'm thinking about all the things that I have, not what I've lost or whatever. So is there any tools that you have that kind of help with that grieving process and how to deal
Well,
with that?
absolutely. And I realized, it was an interesting, timely process that I wrote my book at the beginning I started working on it in February of 2020, not realizing everything that was going to be happening.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a really timely basis because grief and the impact of pain and loss can hit us in so many different ways. And we've observed that on a global level. And what I realize is that if we haven't processed unresolved grief within us in our life, when something else happens, it triggers all that pain and it comes out.
Yeah.
And if we haven't learned how to manage it, it can be very destructive. So we've observed a lot of that in the world. I think it's, people that don't know how to process pain and losing control of the appearances of control of their life. And so when we watch it on TV, it might be what we're hearing the news of somebody else that's lost a life from the COVID or some of the other things that are happening, but it hits us. And if we're not aware of it, we don't even realize that. So the first thing I offer people is take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Because when we're slammed with something that's, grief is an emotional response to the loss of something that's important to us. So it's all about energy. And if we're not breathing deeply and we're not letting all that oxygen come in and support us that is designed to, then that shallow breath is not supporting our needs. So there's a health and wholeness aspect to that. And I really support people with self-care and listening to what your body is telling you, what your heart is telling you. Love yourself. Give yourself that gentle, kind compassion that you need as you gently come to accepting that your mind is refusing to listen to. You don't want to accept it, but you can't change it. So when we can come to acceptance, then we can begin to heal. And in order to heal, we have to go deep into feeling all of the pain. I have a process in my book that I take you through it's like regurgitating it. Scream it, get it all out, because otherwise it's blocking your ability to thrive.
Yeah.
And once we do that, we can actually literally discover something of value within ourselves that maybe we never would have realized otherwise, because we go deep enough to know who I am and what can I bring out to make a difference now. And I think that's part of the process of what I've been doing.
I love that. I love the things that you've shared so far. I appreciate the fact that you started first by saying that you had a foundation already built, so that when you came to this grieving moment, that you had that foundation, those things that you could allow yourself to go through. But often I don't think we think about, well, is this going to happen to me? But I believe if we have that foundation like you did, that it allows us to maybe overcome the grief a little bit easier than if we don't have a foundation or something that we've built our life on. So
absolutely. And that's what I recognize when I observe what's happening in the world, is those that haven't had a foundation, or, something is taken from them. It's like the foundation cracks and they don't know how to scramble to put it back together. And so we all need to be working on building a solid foundation of faith, of belief in ourselves, of having the conviction to move through difficult times, to claim what we really want to be in life. And when we don't do that, then it makes it a lot more challenging to survive the experiences of life, and they're all going to come. And yet, there's that Chinese symbol that one side is crisis and one side is opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, gratitude helps us to focus on the opportunity, the energy of what's being offered in the midst of this horrendous experience. There's a gift in that
Yeah.
if I'm willing to see it.
I love that you brought up the energy, because I think that, and Shane and I have talked a lot about the energy that's inside of us, in our heart, in our mind, and how that, when we release the energy, it can help draw others and things to us. If we just hold it inside, then we're not allowing that energy to flow like it's supposed to. We're like a magnet, right? We attract what we think about, and if we're not processing this information, this grief or these pains, these things that you're talking about, then we're kind of limiting ourselves. Like you say, we're limiting our growth potential. And we're human beings. We're meant to grow. Like that's our very nature, is to continue to evolve and to grow and to change the very nature of our being, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we are all energy. So, our thoughts, our words, and our actions all put into motion an imprint of our experience and how we're affecting the world around us. And if we're not aware of that, then we may not be making healthy choices. So I
Yeah.
think grief becomes a teacher in allowing us to recognize the importance of, now I get to respond rather than react to life. What would be a healthy action for me? And one of the things that's really important, any kind of loss, there is a need to forgive something.
Mm.
So when we hold on to unforgiveness, and obviously I had a huge issue around that when I discovered my son had been murdered, and ultimately 2 individuals were arrested. It took like 18 months of detective work. They're now in prison, and I've had to go to a parole hearing for one of them. I mean, it was my choice. I felt like I needed to exercise my voice, but I clearly told this young man that you made a choice to take someone's life, and there's consequences to that. But my spiritual practice teaches to forgive so that I can let go of the energy that can be toxic to my health and wholeness. There's a Buddhist practice that says unforgiveness is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Mm.
So you have to let go of that toxic energy. So I'm doing that for myself. But forgiveness does not mean letting the person off the hook.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
Yeah.
know, they still have to be responsible for their actions. And so the consequences for that man was to be in jail. And I said, then use this opportunity to heal yourself and to learn about yourself, and to use all the educational things that are available to you so that you can be a better person when you leave than when you arrived. You can make a difference, and you owe that to my son for taking his potential away.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that'll be up to his choice, but that's
Sure.
where I'm at with it.
Yeah. That is amazing that you're willing and want to share this message. I really, I have to commend you for turning that such a tragic thing into something that you can now share with others and help them see benefits of everything, right? I'm not saying that, I mean, I certainly don't wish this upon anyone, but I also believe that you can train your mind to see things differently if you allow it to, and learn from those tragic things that happen. I appreciate the fact that you said we all have to go through grief, and we have to shout it out, and allow ourselves to live that grief, and then work through it. So I really
I
appreciate
actually
that.
write about in my book. I had this kind of epiphany as I was thinking about what is grief and how does it affect us, and it literally came out like grief crawls into us. It embeds itself in every cell of our being. It becomes a part of every aspect of our life. And ultimately, I realized I had to make friends with it.
Mm.
It was not the enemy. It
Yeah.
just was an intense feeling and experience of life. So grief can be that extreme on one side, whereas joy and bliss and, ecstasy on the other side is the same intensity. We need to embrace it all to have the fullness of life. And when we do that, then we can realize that I am building a strength and a resilience to be able to manage life no matter what happens, because obviously you can't control everything that happens.
No.
And that sadness is going to be a part of who I am forever. So coming to terms with how do I live with that, knowing that I'll be triggered every once in a while. And I'm kind of reluctant to say that I get comfortable with it, but that's part of it is I just come to live with it in a way that it reminds me of the treasured memories that I have of the love that I hold for my son.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can now smile about.
Yeah. I love that you brought up, grief is something we have to live with. I think about, we wouldn't really know what joy is without grief, right? And pain and suffering, right? Like we wouldn't know happiness and all of these other positive things if we didn't also experience the negative things. So I like how you kind of brought those two together. That's really great. I I love that thought, and I guess I'd never really. I mean, I know that you have to have both, but I didn't really think about it in the context that we have to live with that inside of our body, inside of us, that we have to then attach to it. It's just a part of who we are in the human experience, right?
Yeah, we think that we're supposed to be just focusing on everything that we like,
Yeah.
the happiness, that's the smooth, easy process. But that we don't grow in that. We need that edge, and that's what grief and the difficult things in our life give us, that growing edge to have something to push against. There's a quote, I don't remember if I'll remember it exactly, but somebody reminded me of something I wrote in my book, and I'm like, oh, cool, I didn't know I said that. But but if we embrace grief, it becomes that growing edge that it becomes fuel for our healing and for us to thrive. We need it for fuel to be able to move forward.
Mm.
And otherwise, we're just kind of like,
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
And what's the challenge in that?
Yeah, that is a beautiful thought. I really appreciate the things that you have shared. So we've talked a lot about your book. How can people get your book?
Well, it is available on Amazon.com, both in paperback and Kindle version. So you can just Google Unraveling Grief. You don't even need to need my name, but it's Meghan with an H, Smith Brooks. um, and um, and so that's available there. I have a website, www.unravelinggrief.com, that has all my book material on it. I have 4 embedded links within my book that you can access through my website that are guided meditations to support you with healing and and transformation. The actual language of it is imprinted in the book to support you if you wanted to record your own words, because having your own voice can be really powerful. But it's some of the things. It's like we need a process, we need a helping hand, we need something as a tool, and the book offers a lot of that, along with my story and how I built the foundation even before my son died. I call it's part 1 and part 2, before and after, because what happens when something like that impacts you is you change at the core.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that part of the healing process from grief is coming to terms with understanding who I am now. I'm not the same person. And if I'm trying to be that person, I'm denying what's happening within me. And I'll stay in that victim place of pain and suffering.
Yeah. And victim mode never goes away, right? Like you just, play play that victim mode, and you just never, it's like an endless pit. And all the bad things seem to go into it. And so whenever we play that victim mode, it's just not a good place to be in. So I agree with you. I think that we do need to learn to do that. And I think that almost is true with anything that happens in our life, right? Like hopefully we're changing to be somebody different tomorrow or today than we were yesterday and tomorrow, right? Like that is hopefully the process of how we're evolving and we're not just going to say, oh yeah, I'm happy to just be the same that I was yesterday. I'm happy to be fine with that.
We're not, because, on a cellular level, we're already changing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
every day is a new beginning and every night is an ending, if we think about it. And every day we can choose how we want to show up, we want to be. Actually, I have a quote on that too. And my son, my older son, who's 39, lives in the Seattle area. He wrote my book and he said, Mom, I was going to go to bed one night. I thought I'd read a couple chapters. He said, I couldn't put it down. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he texted me. He says, I'm in tears. I'm like, I've highlighted all this stuff. He said, I had no idea that's what you thought or what your experience was. And he says, I put on my desktop that quote. Every day I get to choose how I'll show up, who I want to be.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the very reason I wrote this book.
That's
My
great.
job was done.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have talked about some heavy and tough, difficult things, but I'm curious, Meghan, what is something that you're looking forward to in the future?
Ah. I've been building a foundation for my work in the last year. I saw 2020 as a very creative year for me. Though I have to say, I also had a really deep experience of loss again. I have been blessed to have 4 sisters, and my middle sister struggled with alcoholism and depression, and she chose to take her life 4 days before Thanksgiving this past year.
I'm so sorry.
And so, again, I was there to help support my family. She had 4 adult children and a granddaughter, and so you never know how life's going to hit you. So I feel like I built the foundation. I now actually have an online course that's self-paced, that anybody wants to go beyond the practices in my book. There's 8 modules, but you can do it for 8 months if you want to. I have a weekly Q&A session to support people, and that information is on my website. And so I want to build on that. I have a retreat partner that we're doing virtual grief healing retreats now, until we can meet face to face. We have one coming up March 18th to the 21st that will be on Zoom. She is a certified sound healer, a singer songwriter. So she has this wonderful vibrational energy as we collaborate together. And I'm looking at writing another book, maybe
cool.
sharing other people's stories of how they've overcome grief, to give people hope that no matter what life offers you, there is a way through it and we can thrive.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that thought, because I think that we do need to thrive, and hope is amazing. Shane and I, we love hope. Obviously, that's our podcast name, so we enjoy that. So, what is like, other than the quotes that you shared with us? What is another quote that you really like to live by? Something that kind of is your mantra?
Well, my tagline on my personal email is "Know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And I use often the term "flying free," because I think when we release ourselves from the energy of negativity, of pain and suffering, of unforgiveness, of regret, guilt, all that stuff
Yeah.
that keeps us stuck, there is a sense of freedom that comes from that. And so we might have to dig down deep and be willing to acknowledge some truth that's been holding us back. But when we can do that, there is nothing that holds us back. So know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the thoughts and feelings that you've shared. I again thank you and sincerely appreciate the fact that you're willing to talk about these things and help the whole world overcome the things that we feel by working through those. So I really appreciate your insight, Meghan, and the thoughts that you've shared with us today.
You're welcome. I'm grateful, and I hope that there's something that I'm saying and doing, or what I wrote, that will help others, get their attention, to know that there are healthy ways to process pain and anger and all that stuff. You don't have to let the world dictate to you how you're supposed to show up.
Yeah.
We get to choose that, and there's even healthy ways to, like go out and I do my hill walks. It's like process stuff. When I heard this stuff on the news the other day, I'm like, I'm going for my hill walk.
Yep.
You got to get it out somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have this funny saying. I always say, "Choose your choice," and it's really that. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, and I usually say it kind of in a joking manner, but I really believe it that we get to choose the choice that we decide to do today. What am I gonna? What's the rest of my day gonna look like?
Mhm.
And how am I gonna show up? How am I going to represent myself to myself and to the world? And so I love the self-care aspect. I'm wholeheartedly believe that we should love ourselves first. um, we absolutely should, and I don't think we do enough
Mhm.
of that. I'm really starting to get into meditation myself, and so thanks for bringing that up, because I love meditations. I think they're really a way to relax our mind. We relax our body often, but we don't ever tend to think about relaxing our mind, and meditation is a way to do that. So I appreciate all that you said. Shane and I have this cool thing that we always do, and we call it the double down dose.
Ah,
And so what it is Shane and I have a question that we each that we ask you.
okay.
And so my question is what is your definition of hope?
Mm. I think that hope offers us the resilience to live life um, with courage and knowing that we have everything we need to move forward.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's that's awesome. We really like hope. Of course, it's part of our podcast name. The second part of Double Down Dose is how would you define love, or what does love mean to you?
Hmm. You know, you take a deep breath and realize that I think that we call God is the unconditional essence of life. And that when we can embrace that unconditionally, then we're not judging others, we're not seeking the world outside of us to for acceptance, and that true love is something that is our true nature, and that when we embrace that, we love ourselves and we accept others for who they are.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I I totally agree, because I think once we do, acceptance is a huge part of our human experience, right? Like when we accept things and people for what they are and who they are, I think then we come to know ourselves a little bit better. That's so I like that. I like that thought. I really appreciate the things that you brought to us today. I appreciate our conversation. Uh,
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
Yeah, Megan, thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best in the coming days and months with a possible book and your course and everything. Best wishes to you and your family.
Thank you. And I wish you all a prosperous and blessed new year as well.
Thank you.